I thought I'd make a video about memoirs and why I think people love them. The reason is, of course, that I usually love them. So if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that each time I read a memoir, at least I never hate it. I usually rate them quite a bit higher than everything else. If you stay with me until the end of this video, I thought I'd share some of the memoirs I'm looking forward to reading soon. I think there are some similarities between memoirs and fiction. So if you read factual books or not, they all need to have some sort of a structure. Some of them don't, but I don't particularly like them as much. And they need to have a beginning where things are established, they need a midsection, and then they need to have something exciting happening towards the end. Something needs to keep our attention in this attention economy. So they have that in common. Also, they have character development. So the memoirs maybe have more often than not stronger character development than in fiction. That's just a statement. You can disagree with me if you want to, but some of the reasons why authors write a memoir is that they feel they have something to write about, and it is themselves often, and they feel like something has happened and they need to get it out there, and that often involves themselves. Of course, in fiction it also helps to have character development, but it's never as organic, let's say, and it's not as easy as if you've experienced the stuff yourself or if you've witnessed something. So it's more difficult. The last point I thought I'd mention in this part is conflict and resolution. You need to have some sort of struggle, or at least in my memoirs, all of them has people struggling with something that they need to overcome. In fiction, it's more complex. You can just about do anything with this point, but there needs to be something that has to be fixed at some point. Otherwise, what is supposed to happen? I thought I'd begin this chunk of reasons why I love memoirs with something I feel is obvious, and that is that fiction can never really compete with reality. Reality is more fucked up than everything else usually, and it's like when movie producers talk about how they make a movie and they feel like they have to dial back the human emotion because it's not believable for us as an audience sitting there and just looking at something falling apart, and you think to yourself, that could never happen. But of course it can. But it just feels like it can't before you yourself is in that situation. It's like when you get reporters from war-torn areas and talking about all the crazy shit that has gone on in those situations, and you feel like we get so creative when we're evil. There are just a bunch of instances where I'm baffled by humanity. That being said, people love that people are relatable, and when you get people talking about their struggles in a novel, and if you're surprised by how sad they've been or how crap they've had it, at the same time as you can relate to the people, I think that is where the reading experience strike. Because we are all humans and we have sort of the same spectrum of emotions, or at least most of us experience sadness, anger, happiness, the usual stuff. We all have different levels. When reading a memoir, you know that the stuff has happened, or at least a person has thought that it happened or remembers that these things happened, and that makes it more powerful. I can try and give an example. This is one of the most famous memoirs in the world. It's Educated by Tara Westover, and this is about a woman that grows up in a terrible home, and she still manages to not only survive, but she writes a book about it. That's the gist of it, which means that a lot of good stuff has happened to her along the way. If this book had been a fiction, the first thing that would have happened, I guess, is that the violent stuff would have been dialed down a bit, I think, because reading those kinds of things isn't always believable when it's fictionalized, but when she talks about it, it gets very real, and it's useful that the details are there because it makes it believable. But in a total, as a whole package, a girl growing up in a broken home, or disturbed home or whatever, and then succeeding in writing a book and going to school and all of that, that would make for maybe a pretty plain story. Because in fiction you can exaggerate in different ways than you can in a memoir or in a personal story. So I find that to be quite fascinating to think about. I don't know if you experience the same, but to me that's the way I feel it when I read a book. The fiction has to like exaggerate in other ways to make the story exciting, whereas in a memoir like this, you just have to grow up in a terrible home and describe exactly why it's terrible, and that makes the story captivating. Usually memoirs have universal themes like love, growing up, growth. Too many memoirs these days have growth as a topic, but it's the close and personal stuff. But they can all also have a theme. So if you're interested in a specific era or a specific thing, it's like I like music, and that's why I read quite a few music memoirs. But even though if they're about like a musician, they are about the universal themes. But it's the mix that I do love. Also, something that you don't get if you're into a historical period. Let's say you're into the 70s, you can read like a factual book about that era, and it says something like people were hungry all the time. But that doesn't really leave the impact as when you hear about Patti Smith, for example, and actually how hungry she was wandering around in New York City. So it's just better and more nuanced and feeling a connection with the author in a different way than you would if you read a fiction novel. You could sort of guess the author's feelings towards a subject, but you don't have that we're together in this, us two type of feeling that I at least get when I read memoirs. Also, some authors use this opportunity to talk about politics or making a statement about a specific topic. This could go both ways for me. It's not always that I do enjoy the bluntness of it. It might feel a little bit like I don't believe them because they've spent time talking about their personal history, and that is what matters to me. If they then start bringing in political topics, for example, it makes me doubt them in a way, which feels silly. I find fiction to be more nuanced in doing so. So famous novels that are political, but you can read them as non-political books as well. Maybe that's easier. I don't know. I thought I'd end this segment with talking about why I pick up memoirs time and time again. And I do believe that's because they mostly turn out good, in the sense that our main people are doing better towards the end than the beginning. I've never read a memoir that's actually just crap from beginning to end. It always ends with them writing the memoir, which means that they have succeeded in writing a book, which usually means that they've had a better time towards the ending, towards the end of writing that said book, if that makes sense. And, well, we all try to be happy, and reading about people that have found happiness, well, at least for me, that's a positive experience. If you have suggestions for memoirs that end up with people being miserable, please comment below because I would like to check one of those out. There must be some memoirs about people just, not having a great time when they write the book as well. In addition to this, there aren't that many memoirs about ordinary people. Usually the people in memoirs have experienced stuff, which makes them interesting or makes their story interesting. And that is, well, the reason why I read them, I guess. Or one of them, as you know now. So now that I'm finished talking about why I read memoirs, I thought I'd mention some of the memoirs that I'm looking forward to reading in the future, hopefully. And I'll start off with Joan Didion and the Year of Magical Thinking. This author was brought up in the recent live stream that I did, where people loved her books and they said that she managed to provoke feelings, and I guess that is positive. Other than that, This book seems very popular, and it has a lot of. It doesn't seem to be spectacular. It's more about her everyday life. So going back to the ordinary people writing books, I guess I believe this is an extraordinary author writing a book about her ordinary life, and I want to check it out. So that's the first one. The second one is also a book that has gotten a lot of praise, but now this book is seen in a different light, and it's J.D. Vance and Hillbilly Elegy, so the US new vice president. And, well, I've listened to some podcasts discuss this book earlier, and it seems like a person that has changed a lot of his views over the years. And this is said to be a book that describes the area where he grew up in quite well, and now that I know where he is at this point, would be fun to take a look into all of this. I'm fascinated by the fact that a lot of people have praised this, and then he sort of makes a political turnaround, which doesn't make sense having written this book, it seems. So yeah, just fascinating, the whole thing. Let's see where it ends up. The next book I want to read is one that I didn't know of before it was commented on one of my videos. And the book I want to read is Pansam, A Journal of a Murderer by Thomas Gaddis, a mass murderer who writes a memoir. And that in itself is just, yeah, fascinating. And he died in 1930, so it's a time that I imagine in my head as kind of bleak in itself. And then you have this guy going around killing people and getting killed himself. And then before that happens, writes a book. I don't know how much more I can expect from a memoir, but I do want to read that one. It seems really fascinating as well. So that pretty much sums it up. If you have suggestions for memoirs I should read, please leave a comment. I do like them, as you by now know. And thank you to all of you that have pushed the notification bell on my channel. It really helps and makes my life happier. And if you don't subscribe to my channel, please do so. That also helps. So I hope you have a terrific weekend. If you watch this on a Monday, I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.